DBJ with Narrative Secrets. These are just my personal techniques that I use. I don't know, after 30 plus years of gaming, it is a behind the looks scene and information as to how I formulate games, run games, before, during, and after, and kind of like revealing the secrets behind a magic trick. So I hope this information isn't used and abused. Hope I get some comments and feedback, and just hope it adds to the RPG community. Well, anyway, this secret is about a living world, and there's two parts of living world. I'm going to focus more or less on the community of the world. There's also the environment, which I have another video about, and another video about NPCs and monsters. But I'm talking about the larger aspects of the world. And especially when players ask, like, how do you construct a sandbox? What I do is I come up with a world that does not include the player characters. And I know that's bizarre coming from a person who likes to be inclusive, but essentially what I do is I create a world that lives and breathes, and decide, hey, if the player characters never get involved in anything, they sit at home sucking their thumb, you know, the mage summons up a magical Xbox and they just want to sit there and eat Doritos and drink Red Bull and get on an MMO while the rest of the world goes on around them, then I have decided what events will happen in the world when they do not get involved. And the important part of this is that you don't want to make a boring, static world. You want to make a world that's dynamic. You want to make things happen over time. Whether that means there's crop failure and it affects the economy, whether it means the king plans on taking over land and invading another territory's space, whether it means the duke is bizarre and wants to build a zoo and is out to collect all these exotic animals from the Dread Wood, and the druids in the wood don't want people going in and hunting animals, let alone putting them in a zoo. All these little things will be going on in the background whether the player characters are involved in or not. There are two dangers to this, to making a background. One is that if it is not dynamic enough, then there's no reason to get involved, right? So if every day the tavern owner goes to the tavern, opens up, serves drinks, and goes home for the next 25 years, then there's no story there. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that tavern has to have a story, but essentially in the wider world, if each country is stable in and of itself and there's no conflict, then there's no reason to get involved. If the politics in the region have no conflict, there's no reason to get involved. If there are hidden locations of ancient treasures and secrets and such, and although the player characters want to go to those places, if they have no impact in the world, there's no reason to go there, right? So you want to make it dynamic. Even if that means, well, once the player characters go into the ancient temple of Gormish and uncover an ancient secret, it should have an effect on the world. So, for example, hey, those old temples, don't touch them. There's an ancient curse on them. We all know that you're not supposed to go to the burial mounds. Player characters go to the burial mounds, and now the shit hits the fan, right? So you want to allow the opportunity for all the players' actions to affect the world and affect the way things happen. So maybe the Five Kingdoms are neutral until they find out that the benevolent king now has the treasures of the ancient warrior Gormish, and the enemy kingdom is like, whoa, you're amassing a magic and a military against us. And the good king's like, no, we're not. We just happen to uncover this thing. And the player characters can get involved in those things. The other danger is having too much drama. Because if you have too many things going on, you have this effect where the player characters feel like there's so much dynamic energy that they could never stop it. And you have to be really clear up front about these things. And sometimes those things make great stories, like apocalyptic stories. The planet's going to get hit by an asteroid. The ancient gods are going to awaken and the Titans will crush everything. An ancient curse will arise and will wipe out the world with disease, or fire from meteorites striking, or something. You can have a story where there's an apocalypse about to happen and what the players do, but they really need to be foreshadowed about those kind of things beforehand. Because if there truly is no way for them to affect it, that kind of sucks. You know, it kind of reminiscent of Cthulhu, where some players do not like playing Call of Cthulhu because they feel that there's an impossibility to affect the outcome. Even if there's a slight chance you get all the keys to stop the ritual, that's awesome. But if there's just no way to stop the ritual and have the Nameless One come back and destroy the world, then you kind of feel like that kind of sucks. So you really need to warn your players if you're going to create a world that way, where the five kingdoms will destroy each other and life as we know it will be instantly destroyed. Unless you want to play in a game like, say, Dark Sun, where at the bottom left corner of Greyhawk, some wizard created some cataclysm and defiled the world, that part of the world, and then Dark Sun became its own game setting attached to the world of Greyhawk. Yes, those of you who don't know that useless information, if you have an original map of the world of Greyhawk, the bottom left-hand corner represents a portion of the world of Dark Sun. And here's some more useless information. There was a British-designed game, and I want to say it was one of the S series. I'm probably wrong on that. It might be one of the I series, original modules for first edition. And there was a module called All That Glitters. And it went through the Barrier Peak Mountains, the same mountains that Expedition to the Barrier Peaks was created. And the module was about a wizard that created essentially a mystical highway system through the mountains to the other side of the Barrier Peaks where the Great Cataclysm happened. So, useless information there. Anyway, back to the living world. You don't want to make it too dynamic, because if you have things going on in all five nations of equal importance, the player characters are going to say, well, okay, if we go to Nation 1, then that means Nation 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to fall or have something happen, and we can't do anything about it, so why bother doing anything at all? So you really have to modulate it a little bit. So if they go to Nation 1, you make that very dynamic. Hey, listen, the king needs your help, the princess has been captured, the goblinoid army is on its way, the player characters are like, yes, we'll get involved, and then the king's like, oh, by the way, this is very important that we finish this mission and we save the nation, because my enemy, nation number 2, is really looking to use this as a method to assert my power and exploit my weakness. Okay, that's kind of vague, and it kind of foreshadows something in the future, but that's not as immediate as the goblinoid army on its way to stomp, nation number 1, right? So then after you finish your things with nation number 1, maybe they go to nation number 2. The good king is like, hey, I need strong, brave warriors to sneak or to take an emissary to nation number 2 and plead for the case for peace and take this treaty and have them sign it or something. Or they hold a crystal of power that they too got out of the dread caves of Gromish, the ancient warrior, and are using that crystal to empower themselves. And if we could steal that crystal, we can, enforce our treaty and a peace between us, and it will remove their power. And so you go, okay, that's the next game, so we're going to do that. And then you say, well, nation number 3 is worried about the growing conflict between nation number 1 and 2. And they want nothing to do with Nation 1 and 2. Number 3 wants to be at peace. They live in what's known as the Dreadwood, and they want to be left alone. But because of the growing Cold War between Nation 1 and 2, they are infringing on the resources of Nation 3. And so we have to go into Nation number 3, into the Dreadwood, which isn't really a nation. Why did I turn that off? Anyway, threw me the hell off. Living world. You want to create a world that moves and breathes on its own without the player characters. That way you know the motivations when the player characters are involved. So if the king is intent on invading another place and the player characters appeal to the king, no, please don't invade, give us an opportunity to have a different answer, great. The king goes, you know what, you made a good point. But remember, if you fail, I'm still going to invade. Oh, okay. And it allows you as the game master to create a motivation, a realistic, within the game setting, realistic motivation, and say, well, the king wants to save his people and he's got to be proactive. But this evil nation is really powerful, and if he starts a war, they're going to die. We've got to do something about this. And the king doesn't have to be evil. Even the quote-unquote evil nation doesn't have to be evil. There can be things that are motivating the goblinoid army to amass. Well, why are they amassing? Well, we don't like adventurers because the adventurers that happened before them killed their women and children to take their treasure and kick them out of their homes, and now they've galvanized into an army, and the player characters are going, kind of sounds like something we would have done, but man, now we have to live with the consequences of those a-holes? Man, okay, well, we're going to have to figure out some way around this. And so, you got your conflict and your fights and your role-playing and your politics and all that kind of stuff. So, long story short, create a living world. Create a world that lives and breathes, that has a motivation and has elements in it that is motivated beyond the player characters. And so once the player characters dip their feet into it and they say, man, test the temperature, maybe they find out, oh, I can change how things are going. People do care about my opinions, for good or bad. And the player characters don't have to be politically motivated. They can just be, hey, we're just wanderers, but their influence is changing the course of, can change the course of nations, cities, villages, or even people's private lives. So anyway, DBJ, as always, create a living world. Don't destroy it by using static energy, and also don't destroy your own sandbox by creating too much drama, too much dynamic energy too quickly. Little bits and pieces, create little brush fires for the players to go around and put out until they're powerful enough to look at the world in a larger span. And this also gives them an opportunity to learn more about the world that you created and be invested into it. And of course, absolutely, incorporate anything and everything that the players have. If a player character is a rogue and they're from a mysterious guild, incorporate that guild into your world. If they're playing a paladin, incorporate the politics and the other knights of their realm. If they're playing a cleric, of course you're going to have drama, even within the own religious factions, who may love and or hate or even despise or undermine one of the clerics in the group who's going out and witnessing to these people, but the religious organization has other plans and has created other enemies and friends that the player characters may not know of. So anyway, it's DBJ. Hope this was helpful, and I'm out.